thank you, Graham. I do remember those discussions in 2002, and that was just 2 years after I got involved with Geoparks, right at the start in the year 2000. And I can assure you at that time, we had absolutely no idea of what was going to happen, that we had eventually become UNESCO's first new designation since 1972. Hey, voila. Okay, so this is my current boss, Madame Azoulay. She's the Director General of UNESCO. Where should I be in this now? This is worst about being first on, you know.
Here, I'll do it.
No,
Do you want me to collect it whenever you want?
Just go ahead there. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so as Graham mentioned, I'm head of our science at UNESCO, and within that remit, I am in charge of the UNESCO Global Geoparks. It's gone now. It's gone. Okay. So this is a photograph of one of the few areas of the world that is both a World Heritage Site, a Biosphere Reserve, and a UNESCO Global Geopark. And some of you I know were there last September. These are the Azore Islands of Portugal. And I'm showing this slide because UNESCO is the United Nations Education, Science and Cultural Organization, and it does all those things, and that's the reason it does geology, because of the S of UNESCO Science. But it's mostly known for this designation, the World Heritage Site in Iceland. You've got 2 World Heritage Sites, as you know, Thingvellir and also Surtsey. And as a geologist, Thingvellir is of course the ridge, it's the rift where the 2 continents are put on apart. But that's not the reason it's a World Heritage Site. It's because of its cultural significance as the site of the Althing during the settlement. And the other one is Surtsey. Of course, that erupted out of the sea in 1963, and we saw all these wonderful volcanic processes taking place. And there's even a type of volcanic eruption now called the Surtseyan eruption. But that's not the reason it's a World Heritage Site. It's a World Heritage Site because of the colonization of plants onto Surtsey. So, although there are over almost 1,100 World Heritage Sites, very, very few of them are there just because of the geology. Very, very few. It was established in 1972. The Man and Biosphere came a year earlier. It was 1971. And there are about 669 of those across the world. I'm not sure if there are any in Iceland. In Ireland we have 2. But throughout all this time, the focus was very much on conservation, preservation of these sites, and very little thought really was given to the people who live either in these sites or around them. And it was that focus of trying to bring people into these sites that was really the foundation and the reason why we started to create geoparks 18 years ago now. And this is the definition that we came up with 3 years ago when we went through this process in UNESCO. It's a single unified area, so in that way it differs from the other 2, which can be a bit here and a bit there. So a geopark must be a single area where you have international geological landscapes, but where they're managed in this very particular holistic concept of protection, education and sustainable development. And people always ask, is a geopark just about geology? And the answer is no, because the geo in geopark comes from Gaia, the Greek goddess Gaia, goddess of the earth. And if you think about, especially in a country like Iceland, where the people are so shaped by the geology, by the land, by the challenges that has given you over the last 1,000 years. And you see that in many places across the world, where particular rocks, particular landscapes, particular mountains might have a special meaning to people, it's in their folklore. The type of soil that people can farm is dictated by the rock. Everything we have, everything that we are, comes from the planet we live on. And it's that and all those links that create the geopark. And this is a photograph of one in China, Shanghai. And if you have a head for heights, I challenge you to go on this glass walkway. Of course, one other fundamental difference between the geoparks and the other two site designations in UNESCO is this concept of networking. We have 127 UNESCO Global Geoparks, and they're all linked together through the Global Geoparks network. But on a regional basis, to facilitate cooperation, we have 3 continental networks. We have the European Geoparks network, and this is a photograph from the meeting last year in Ireland, in the Burning Cliffs Lower. We have the Asia Pacific Geoparks network, who have just created a whole series of projects that are working on together. And just as of a few months back, we now have what's called GeoLag. It's the Latin American and Caribbean Geoparks network. And this is fundamental to the concept of geoparks. This networking is not an optional extra. This is fundamental. You have to do this. You have to talk to other geoparks, you have to share experience, you have to form common projects. This is really fundamental. If you don't do that, then there are consequences for that. Geoparks also have a role to play in raising awareness of particular earth science issues. One of them is the issue of climate change, because of course the rocks in all of our geoparks contain the story of past climates of what the earth was like. And just to give you, some crazy things about that, if you went back, say, 500 million years, the earth was completely covered in ice. The snowball earth, completely covered in ice. But for most of Earth history, there's never been ice anywhere on the planet. So the climates do fluctuate on this planet, and the problem is that the fluctuations now are caused by us, of course, and with unpredictable consequences. So geoparks have a role to play about that and to inform people. Many of our geoparks, such as the 2 in Iceland, are tectonically active areas of the world. This is it was a school building. I think Gail was there for the earthquake last June, yeah. And the children in this school, just the week before, had undergone earthquake awareness training by the geopark. And as soon as the ground started to shake, the kids in that school knew exactly what to do. It was unbelievable. They all got out without any harm. They all got out. But the whole village, the school, completely flattened. And also many geoparks are in former mining areas, and when we think of mining and quarries, we don't usually think of UNESCO. But of course you all have a smartphone, and the material for that smartphone has to come out of the ground somewhere. So we have to remember that as a society we have relied on earth resources throughout civilization, and these places are special places, and they contain the record of many of these industries, such as the Copper Coast, for example, in Ireland. But geoparks are about people. This is the real message. This is the fundamental message of what geoparks are about. Community involvement in a geopark is something that's taken very, very seriously. The community, it's their geopark. They should be involved in the management of the geopark. Lots of geoparks train up local people to be tour guides, such as we see here at a geopark in Portugal. And the people can exploit the concept of the geopark to tell visitors their stories, to sell them their handicrafts, to really, it's really about empowering the local people who live there. These are some of the local people from the inspiring geopark of Imbabura in Ecuador, where these are the pre-Inca people. They still speak the Quechua language. They have the concept of nature called Pachamama. So in their culture, and they're surrounded by volcanoes, the volcanoes are either male or female. and they've got a whole story about that. And this is also part of the Geopark, bringing that story together with the science and celebrating both in a way that these people have their culture valued. This is a lady from Japan, from the Toyousa Geopark, and one of her, that this was the site of a major and sudden, without warning, volcanic eruption in 2002. And her job, she's called the Volcano Meister. She's one of about 10 people in this geopark who goes around the local communities, goes around schools to explain the signs of what to look out for should this volcano erupt again, even though it's heavily monitored. So again, a very valuable job within that geopark in Japan. There we go. And this is a community centre in the Copper Coast in Ireland. And I think that certainly, Richard, you and I remember when this was completely derelict. It was an old derelict church, the roof had fallen in. And through just fundraising at the local level in that geopark, and by joining in a European Union project, just like yours, they were able to get funding, which not only transformed this into, well, the idea was that it should become a visitor centre for the Copper Coast Geopark, but it's actually become much, much more than that. This is now the heart of the community. The community uses this for all sorts of functions right throughout the year. So it's something that has really, really taken hold, and it has created an identity, or helped to re-establish an identity in that area. And this is the Aspiring Geopark of Baringo in Kenya. And this is, believe it, that's me, talking to the local people and trying to answer their questions about what a geopark is, what it might do, what it will not do, what their involvement might be. And it's very much this kind of interaction that's really essential at the start of a process when you're creating a geopark, to really explain to people what it is. Communicating geoscience, of course, can be a difficult job, as Kirsten and I know as geologists, that we have our own language that we can talk about. But it's important that we do it in a way that's very inclusive. And many geoparks, such as this one in Japan, have kids clubs, or where they bring the children in and explain things to them in a very much in a fun way. And I know many, and Marble Arch have fossil fun days and things like this. So this is a very valuable way of bringing our science to the new generation. I talk about local rangers, local tourist guides. This is an example of one from the Grutas del Palacio in Uruguay. And this is a new geopark 4 or 5 years ago. It became a geopark, and it has completely transformed that area. Completely and totally transformed it. It's now one of the 2 major visitor destinations for the country. The government is now recognising that and investing a lot of money. And of course, jobs are being created in this part of Uruguay. Protecting geology, protecting our diversity, absolutely, but let's do it in a new way. This is a dinosaur. It's from one of the Chinese geoparks. And rather than dig out the dinosaur and bring it off to Beijing, to a museum there, let's just leave it where nature intended, so that people can see the shape of what Mother Nature wanted it. So this is a very innovative way of displaying our heritage. This is a roadway, a new road being built on the Lesbos Island, UNESCO Global Geopark, and as they're doing it, they're uncovering fossil tree trunks, hundreds of them. Unbelievable. And for the last number of summers, they've employed a whole team of conservationists to preserve all these things. Education is fundamental. Again, this is Uruguay. As part of their application to become a geopark, the local school children, this is the school uniform there, the local school children did a project on what is a geopark and presented it when we were doing the evaluation mission. And what was interesting was that in the audience, there were 3 government ministers from Montevideo, the Minister of Tourism, the Minister of Education, and the Minister of Economic Development. And these kids we're basically telling them we live somewhere special and you need to help us look after it. And then this is another school class. This time this is there from the Hong Kong UNESCO Global Geopark, and they're just about. I'll go back to that. No. Hong Kong. Okay. So what has happened in Hong Kong is that they've formed a twinning relationship with some of the Geopark schools in Japan and in mainland China. And these three sets of geoparks are now exchanging. The students are going from one to the other. And that's very important because China and Japan don't necessarily have a great relationship with each other. And so by the Geopark facilitating this kind of cooperation, it's bringing a bit more understanding, a bit more respect between these two countries. Art also has a role to play. This is the Haute-Provence UNESCO Global Geopark in southern France. And this is a sculpture placed by Andy Goldsworthy in front of these vertical rocks that are 2,500 metres up in the Alps. Those vertical rocks were once on the bottom of an ocean. And Andy Goldsworthy was thinking, God, that's hard. How did they get so up and vertical? And so rather than put an information board with all the text, he just put a little thing like that which would make people stop and look and just get them to think what is going on there. And here we are, of course, here in Reykjanes, where we have the bridge between continents. I think you'll go to see that tomorrow. And this is also a nice way to show, you know, the movement of the Earth, that one side is Europe, one side is North America, and you can walk across it. Of course, the geology is not just as simple as that, but this is a nice way to explain it. Supporting local enterprise. As I mentioned, one of the core principles of the Geoparks is a sustainable economic development, primarily through sustainable tourism. And one of the things that we encourage all the geoparks to do is to support local enterprise. Here we have an example of a women's cooperative in Greece, where the women are producing local foods in a traditional way, traditional products, using some of Greece's best organic olive oil. So this is very important. We also have a women's cooperative on the Geoscience Island, UNESCO Global Geopark in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And here the women who have a very valuable culture. It's the only part of Iran that has an Arabic culture. The rest is Persian, but this island, they still have the culture that places like Dubai have destroyed because it's become so modern. Here they retain the culture and they have the different types of costumes that they'll sell as part of the craft, as part of the work of the women's cooperative. Support local enterprise. I just want to show you now one from my own country, the Burren and Cliffs Moor. I think you know, some of you know who these people are. It's my two, the three of us really started all this show a long time ago, Gail and Nicholas. In the Burren they have established, one of the things they've established is the Burren Food Trail. And this food trail has won numerous awards, and indeed the product, one of the members of the food trail, her product is now for sale in Harrods in London. And they don't just have one food trail, they actually have 5 going across: the Farm to Fork, the Burren Cheese Trail, Nature's Child, Market Garden, and Taste the Ocean. And this is really a fantastic thing. You can go across the geopark, go from one producer to another, to taste the different products. All these things are produced locally, small scale, the usual traditional recipes, local products. Many of you were able to taste some of the food at the meeting last year in March, down there. And not only or one of the producers now selling food in Harrods, but another one, the Wild Honey Inn, has become the first pub in Ireland to be awarded a Michelin Star. So this area, this geopark, is really coming on the map now, and people, unbelievable to say, are going to County Clare for the food. So you wouldn't have said that 10 years ago, I suppose, but you can now. I also want to show you some local enterprise from an aspiring geopark in Peru, in Arequipa. So this is an enterprise for young people. The young people come from the most disadvantaged areas and families in this part of Peru. And really, it's a residential place that they live in, and the accommodation they have might be basic by our standards, but it's much better than they had at home. So here, some of them are learning how to carve stone, and for the geopark, they'll actually be making signs and markers out of this. So it's these kids that are doing that. Here they're learning about archaeology. You also learn about geology as well. And in this picture, the kids are learning about the catering business, how to cook in these big kitchens, but also how to serve people when you're working in a hotel, when you're working in a bar. Here, they're cooking alpaca. It's a bit tough, but the good thing about it is that all these kids then get employed. So this is a very valuable thing, very, very important within the geopark context. So I just want to go very quickly through the application process for those who don't know it. If you want to become a UNESCO Global Geopark, Graham, across my coast, yes, this is how you do it. You send me an application dossier between October and November. It's not like World Heritage, we want just a 50-page dossier, nothing too heavy, but it has to follow a particular format. We then place a summary of that onto UNESCO's website. So if you look at the UNESCO website at the moment, and you know way around it, you'll find this year's applications, a summary of this year's applications. This is what we call the intergovernmental check. Because UNESCO is the United Nations, so we have to make sure that there's no trouble with any of these applications, and if we receive any complaint from a particular country about one, then we withdraw that application. The geology of them is independently reviewed by the International Union of Geological Sciences, and we actually have a former representative of IUGS in the room with us this morning. And should everything be okay, then we will send 2 people to your area between May and August to do an evaluation mission. The report of that mission is discussed in September by the body called the UNESCO Global Geoparks Council, and they will make a decision to either accept the application, defer it for 2 years, or to reject. And then the final approval is made by UNESCO's executive boards. It's the member states of UNESCO who make the final decision. And in the case of an applying area that overlaps with one of the other 2 labels, then we want to know, well, why do you want to become a geopark if you're already World Heritage or Biosphere Reserve? And do the other labels, the management of the other labels support you? And how are you going to work together to avoid any overlap, and how are you going to work together? So that would be important for the Causeway Coast. But that's not the end of the story, because this is another difference from the other 2 UNESCO labels. When you become a UNESCO Global Geopark, it's just for 4 years. After 4 years, then you have to go through a process called revalidation. And in many ways, I suppose Egbert probably doesn't want to hear this, but the revalidation can be a bit more intense than the original evaluation, because the revalidation is about quality, and it's about seeing improvement. So we want to see during this process that the tourism that you're promoting is really sustainable, that the community really are involved, that jobs really are being created, that there are things that are happening on the ground, that you are working with the other geopark. And it's two people go to visit and they check. We have this big Excel spreadsheet, the self-evaluation form, which is simply a SWOT analysis, which will help us identify that all the things that should be happening are happening in terms of sustainability. And the result of this, it can be that you can get what we call the green card. So this means that you retain your status as a geopark for another 4 years. If there's a little problem that's been identified, or a big problem that's been identified, then we think, okay, you've a little bit of homework to do. So you've got 2 years to do that. We call this the yellow card. It doesn't mean you're a second-class geopark or anything like that. You're still a full UNESCO Global Geopark, but it's just for 2 years. And then after those 2 years, you go through this process again. And if we don't see enough improvement, then we feel that the quality level has dropped below what is expected of a UNESCO site, and so you lose the designation, the so-called red card. The last time the red card happened was 6 years ago, and I'm delighted that that area worked very hard after receiving the red card and is now back as a UNESCO Global Geopark. So it's not the end of the story, even if you get a red card. And one of the best things for UNESCO, because of course UNESCO is always in a state of financial crisis, is that the costs of all these trips are paid by the geopark itself. So this is a kind of, it spreads it out evenly, makes all geoparks have to go through this process, so they have to cover the cost, and it works out quite evenly. So I'm just going to very quickly now go through what happened last year. So last year the council, this bunch, examined 16 new applications, and they approved that the areas of Beaujolais in France, Kalbang in Vietnam, Selata Palabrahanatu in Indonesia, Conca de Tremp-Monsec in Spain, Femen Ardennes, the first geopark in Belgium, Gangwushan Yushrihi in China, Huanggang Dabishan in China, Izu in Japan, Ngorongoro Lengai, Tanzania, the first UNESCO Global Geopark in Sub-Saharan Africa, Mundangsan in the Republic of Korea, for the Canadians, Hersey, Quebec, Rinjani Lombok, Indonesia, and Satu will be the first one in Thailand. So this is the list that is now going to UNESCO's Executive Board in April for approval. And this year, yes, economics value. This was the summary results of a study done a few years back now. It was done just before the Global Geoparks became part of UNESCO. It was done by the United Kingdom's National Commission to UNESCO. And what they were trying to do was assess the value of UNESCO to the economy of Britain. So they looked at all the things that UNESCO did, World Heritage Site geoparks, UNESCO chairs, biosphere reserves, and everything else. And they came up that it's over 89 million British pounds worth to the UK economy. But you can see that there are two things that are way out ahead. Not surprisingly, World Heritage takes up about 2/3 of the value, so it's an enormous contributor to the UK economy. But we were completely surprised that coming in a very respectable second, considering we weren't even a UNESCO designation at that stage, were the geoparks. And then, of course, you can do some clever maths here, because there are 28, or there were 28 World Heritage sites in the UK, so that equated to, per site, over £2 million each. But 6.5, the half being Marble Arch, it's half of it's in the Republic of Ireland, with 18.8, means that the average geopark brings in just short of 3 million. So that was a very nice study for us. And then another report showed that in terms of tourism income, over a 12-month period, that the geoparks were bringing in over 7 million in terms of tourism into each of the geoparks. in the UK. Another study was done 2 years ago in Portugal, and again, this is based on bed nights, restaurant places. These things are based on activities that the beds were specifically booked by people who were going to attend a geopark activity, paying on to a geopark activity. The meals in the restaurants were associated with official geopark activity. So this is direct income. And it showed that this geopark was bringing in an additional 15 million euro to this area of northern Portugal. So those are just some statistics for you. I can get this to move on. This year, we have 23 new applications for geoparks, and they will be examined this summer, and then the results will be discussed by the council at this meeting, which everyone's invited to. It's in the Italian Alps, the Dolomites, in September. And I think I maybe have time just to very quickly, one picture just for each of the new applications so you know where they're coming from. If this works, we have one from Italy, Aspromonte. It's the very south of Italy, the bit right beside Sicily. Could you just click forward, thank you. We have our first application from Costa Rica, in Charipo. Another one from Spain, in Granada. Estrela from Portugal. This is an existing geopark that's going through a big expansion from Yushan in China. Gravani, Kozani in northern Greece. The Holy Cross Mountains in Poland. This is the first application from entirely within Poland. Imbabura, which applied 2 years ago, was deferred and is now back with a new application from Ecuador. Geoscience in China. Our first application from Chile, the Cutralcura in southern Chile. Our first application from Kazakhstan, Mangistau. Our first application from Luxembourg, Mellerdal. Another application from Spain, this one is from northwest Spain, from Galicia. An area in Germany that's been operating as a geopark for many, many years, and now is finally applying the release. We have our first application from Nicaragua, Rio Coco. Another application from Finland, Saimaa. An extension application from China. So this is an existing geopark, Sanqingshan. This is the famous stone bridge in Taishan. It's an existing geopark going through extension. Toba Caldera in Indonesia, the site of a super volcanic eruption about 70,000 years ago. The lake is what's left of the volcano. The islands of Vis and the Adriatic Sea in Croatia. The volcan Tacana on the border of Mexico and Guatemala. The Yangan Tao from the Republic of Bashkortostan in the Russian Federation. And Yemingshan in China. So that's the geopark supporting the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And although I finished the talk, I just want to show you a quick video, if that's possible. It's just a very short video.